One of the major aspirations of Canada West is to see the natural resource sectors, agriculture, energy, mining, forestry, and fisheries, recognized and treated as fundamental building blocks of the Canadian and the Western economies, not relics from the past or dinosaurs on their way to extinction. We recently did a lengthy podcast on energy, in particular petroleum, as a fundamental building block of the economy. It involved my colleague Marco Navarro-Jenny, who's a think tank person who's given a lot of thought to these issues, and a special guest, David Yeager, who's a longtime participant in the Canadian oil patch and has written extensively on energy sector subjects. You can view this podcast by going to thewesternstory.ca, episode 2, and go to minute 34:30. But this podcast will give you an idea of what to expect. We got onto the subject, first of all, of the size of the energy sector, particularly the petroleum sector. People know all about the producing end of it, but there's an energy manufacturing sector, there's an energy service sector, there's an energy knowledge and technology sector built on top of that. And here's Marco and David discussing the size of the petroleum sector in Canada. And where we want to start, David, is maybe with defining the sector. When we talk about the energy sector, and particularly the petroleum sector, exactly what are we talking about? And maybe I'll communicate one of our biases here. I have this concern that when we talk about any resource sector, but let's say the petroleum sector, the focus is always on the producing sector, that it's the producing sector. That's what a lot of people understand. But
Right.
There's a manufacturing sector on top of that. There's an energy service sector on top of that. There's an energy knowledge sector on top of that. There's an energy technology sector on top of that. And the total contribution to GDP from the whole is a lot bigger than what an awful lot of people think. But anyway, there's my bias. And you can take it away. Take it away.
Canada is, whether we ought to be or not, and it's possibly one of the best kept secrets in the country, is we're the 5th largest oil and gas combined producing jurisdiction in the world on a barrel of oil equivalent basis. The countries, and I think I can get the order right, but in order, they're the United States, and then there's Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Actually, Iran is still a big producer because they produce a lot of gas. So that is there's a fact, and that is about 4% of the world's oil plus the natural gas. And so were it to disappear, this would be equivalent to a limited thermonuclear attack in the Middle East. I mean, it would be a huge cavity in the global supply chain and would have a huge impact on prices. We started diversifying. I mean, if you go back in history, Calgary went on natural gas in 1912. That's for the first time. The first petrochemical facility in Canada, where we were building things other than raw energy, was built in 1941 by Cominco, and it was building ammonium nitrate. At that time, it was for the war effort, but that was later turned into ammonium nitrate fertilizer. So we've been actually in the fertilizing business and in the petrochemical business. That was the first move. And then Celanese in the 50s, when we discovered we had lots of oil and gas, built the first petrochemical plant to build fabrics like rayon and nylon and so on. So that started in the 50s. And that was, then of course, on the refining basis. Refining has generally been located where it is. The other thing we started out when we started in the business was the oil services sector was largely imported at that time. Pretty well all the rigs and equipment and know-how we came out from the States back at that time. But that was an area where the serial entrepreneurs of Western Canada took over. And one of the best kept secrets is the length, the size and breadth of the oil services sector. And this is companies like Precision Drilling now that have rigs all over the world, and companies like Ensign Drilling. So we have been a manufacturer and exporter of value-added technological solutions for the global extraction industry for some time. And this moves on. There's the petrochemical business. It started up in Sarnia with local oil and gas. But of course, they got a pipeline to that built as quick as they could. Imperial Oil has really started out in 1949 with tankers, and they put in the Line 5 we hear so much about in 1953. So we have been supplying the country with oil and gas. So what we did, when I was the chairman of the Petroleum Service Association in 2010, at that time, we had another made in Alberta problem with royalty reviews because people didn't really understand the breadth and size of the business. So we went down the supply chain where we looked at upstream oil and gas, and then we went down not the obvious supply chain because Statistics Canada data is really not particularly useful. They have one big bucket for resource extraction, so they put oil and gas, mining, fishing, and forestry in the same category. And the fishing business, as you know, on the prairies isn't what it once was. So anyway, so you really have to peel back the onion and go into the subsectors. But what we did, I worked with the Canadian Energy Research Institute at that time, and we went down the supply chains of all the other things it takes to produce this volume of oil and gas. And this, everything from pickup trucks to cable to plumbing and valves and steel. I mean, the Canadian oil and gas was big enough so that Algoma Steel put in at Sault Ste. Marie, they put in a casing plant back in the 50s. And so if you actually look at the whole thing, it is way, way bigger than you imagine. And we try to say that. You'll find the Prevost Bus Company in Montreal, their biggest customer was the oil sands for a long time, hauling crews out to the oil sands. And so they try to do this all the time, to point out how integrated the oil and gas industry, supporting the oil and gas industry, and producing 8 million barrel oil equivalent a day. That's why we're number 5. That's just the BOE equivalent coming out of Canada, mostly Western Canada, a little bit offshore Newfoundland. We try to explain this to people, where their jobs come from, and those who are affected directly tend to pay attention to this sort of thing. So it is, I have no idea how I can't fathom how Canada would be where it is today had we not had this incredible industry.
So if you want more of that discussion, go to thewesternstory.ca and view the entire discussion. We then got into the discussion of what can the governments and the private sector do to meet the challenge of the emissions from the combustion of hydrocarbons in the development of the petroleum sector. And I think you'll find what Marco and particularly David have to say on that subject, both surprising and refreshing.
I guess it speaks to the center of what we're trying to do here, that this is fundamental.
It is.
It's not something that you can just simply dismiss. I mean, you can dream that it will disappear, but because it is fundamental, it is here and it's not going to go away.
Well, apart from government just leaving this sector alone, are there positive things that, in terms of public policy, that the provincial or federal governments could be doing to greater recognition of this fundamental role the sector plays and laying the foundation for a positive future, not a negative one? Are there positive things that they could be doing other than leaving everybody alone?
Well, leaving alone now, after beating shall continue till morale improves. After 7 years of taking it on the chin, from the oil price to collapse to all the things that have been done, is leaving it alone in itself would be an improvement. But I think the world wants to decarbonize. I get that. I mean, this is the world can decarbonize. And one of the conclusions I came to when I looked at the globe, and I looked at world oil consumption, and I looked at who needs what, 7.9 billion people in the world, and I think we saw that at COP26 recently, where India said we're not going to, was soft on coal. Just the realities of managing 2.5 billion poor people that need energy of any kind. We have the enormous opportunity, and what I've said this many times. What I'd like to do to the young people of Canada, we could do this if somebody would listen. We could, and this is something the West could take the charge on. Is instead of terrifying the next generation about climate, why don't we engage them? Why don't we have an honest discussion about climate change? I'm talking an honest discussion on a global basis that India and China are 2 of the greatest GHG reducers, and they're not going to live without energy, to win the next election here in Canada. Okay, period.
Yep.
And so the point is, what should we do? The first thing we should do is have an honest assessment as a nation of what our contribution to global emissions is relative to the rest of the world, and understand you could to heck with the oil industry, you could depopulate Canada and not make a material dent in global emissions. You could shut the whole country down, it wouldn't matter. So the point is, what should we do? Well, what we ought to do is people should understand that what the greatest single contribution that could be made to greenhouse gas emissions is more efficient fossil fuels, more efficient in production, more efficient in processing, and more efficient in consumption. So if we could use the brains and the knowledge and the advantages we have in Canada and engage the young people today, say we're going to save the world not without fossil fuels, we're going to save the world with fossil fuels. And we're going down that path a little bit in Calgary. We're seeing the innovations in carbon capture and storage and the adoption of hydrogen. Like, we're there. So I would like as a country, we should be proud of the fact we're in the business, and we should do what the industry has been trying to say for years. We should show the world how to be the best, most efficient, lowest carbon fossil fuel producer in the world, innovate with the new technologies, sell them all over the world, and make some money at that as well. That is in our grasp, and it's just, I can't believe that we can't even have the discussion as a nation. We can't even have the discussion.
Lastly, we got on to the subject of what to do besides discussing and talking about the petroleum sector as a fundamental building block of the economy. What can individuals do? What can you do who are watching this podcast? So here is Marco and David on what can be done to secure the recognition and treatment of the resource sectors, particularly petroleum sector, as a fundamental building block of the economy. Well, one thing we want to end up on, and I worry particularly in the internet and Facebook era of us substituting discussion, endless discussion, talk about our problems, and what can be actually done about them. So if you had, like we have people watching this podcast who probably agree with 80, 90% of what we're talking about, what you've said here. But what can they, is there any practical thing that they can do to push things in more in the direction that you're talking about? What can they do as distinct from just talking about it?
I was reminded of the MacDonald Commission in 1985. It was a Royal Commission under the Mulroney administration. I think leading up to free trade. Because you remember, in the free trade was a great thing. What are we doing? What are we doing? And
it's existential.
Oh my God! We're gonna buy and sell things with our closest neighbor. God help us all. So we went. I remember one. It was anyway. But what? And I've been trying to answer that question myself. And I think the West, and maybe this interview should be a catalyst. We should get the major industries in the West. We should get the major trade associations that represent these industries. We should get the labor unions that are employed by our major industries. And we should have a non-political Royal Commission into our own future. And don't invite the politicians. Just sit down with the people who live here, all the stakeholders. Get the forestry industry, the agriculture in there, the clean tech sector, the affected unions, even the public service unions. Just not the politicians. And say, who are we? What do we do? What pays the rent? What's going on in the world? And I think if you got this done with the right people dedicating the time of effort, it would take a while. It would be very, very difficult not to keep that undertaking off the front page, in my view. This big picture thing, and not just the private sector thing. Academia. Let's invite the major universities to participate. Their economic departments and so on, and let's talk about why we live here, what we do, what the world is doing, how we provide the things the world needs, You asked me? I just an idea.
Another commission that it was further back than that, but almost had this profound impact was the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism
Okay.
back in the 60s, which laid the foundation for defining Quebec as a distinct society.
Sure.
So what about the Canada West Commission that defines the West as a distinct society and then addresses these our distinctives tend to be more economic. They're not social cultural so much as they, but address the challenge is that both of those commissions were initiated and got their status from governments. Do you think you could set up a Canada West Commission that had enough status and clout that it wasn't endorsed by the governments and the politicians?
I don't think there's any choice. I don't see how you're going to get anything done without depoliticizing it. I mean, you can't take, modern politics and people. We have the statistic. The current federal government has the support of 20.3% of the Canadians eligible to vote. There's never been more done with less. Never has and then he goes to Paris or goes to, on these UN climates, Copenhagen, Tokyo, they all run together. Then he goes to Glasgow and tells us what he's going to do to the most important resource industry the country has. And China, the people that they don't care, India doesn't care, nobody signed up for it. And how do you get it back in a peaceful way, in a useful, peaceful way? And so what are the chances of this government investigating itself with a royal commission? Zippo. I mean, none, not a chance.
And you don't think the 3 or 4 Western provinces could ever get together and commission such a commission?
You can certainly ask them. I think Alberta and Saskatchewan would jump in.
I like the idea very much. The issue is who has the summoning power outside government. Because do you remember the economic summit that Alison Redford summoned years and years ago?
Yeah, another great report that never saw the light of day.
And that's what I mean. I guess I'm saying that I share your sentiment that getting all the politicians in the room invites a kind of campaigning and a kind of conversation that distracts from the actual.
I see CAP. I see the grain growers. I see the perhaps the industry trade associations. But you have to invite academia. You have to go to the universities, and you have to go to the trade unions. And
call it the Canada West Commission, but it's a non-governmental sponsored.
It would be structured in a way that this is the citizens of Western Canada frustrated at the direction of the country. We need to find a way to speak for ourselves. And this is what I'm going to focus on writing about. I was supposed to be writing another book. I ended up back in the oil service business, helping out my brother-in-law with a new technology. I'm actually in the business of shutting off methane leaks from old oil wells. So I turned green as a senior citizen, which is fine. It's good. It's good work. The world needs it. We're going to make a boatload of money. That's not the point. The point is that how do we, when looking at all of this, I think there's enough anxiety. And I think and maybe the provinces would participate. Maybe
give them a chance, but don't
certainly ask them.
Don't stop if they don't.
Well, no. If they declare that, if they, I would start. The germ of it would start with the major. So and this could be the restaurant association. The hotel associations, the transport people, the truckers, the people that are just out there every day trying to make a go of it in this incredible onslaught of public policy that just doesn't make any sense to anyone who's not running for public office.
Again, thanks for joining us. And if you'd like to see more on this subject of energy, particularly the petroleum sector as a fundamental building block of the economy of Canada West and Canada as a whole, if you'd like to contribute your own views on this subject, please visit thewesternstory.ca episode 2 and go to minute 34:30.